I don't want normal. I don't want predictable. I don't want milestones. I don't want anything that anyone else has. I had it all. It didn't bring me happiness, and I have no desire to live a normal life. Rachel, I'm very excited for this one today, and I feel there's a lot we can get into and a lot of angles we can take, from spiritual awakenings to running away to the other side of the world and discovering tools that work for you. Before we do all of that, what do we need to know about you and your journey before jumping into the episode?
Sorry, yeah, I mean, my journey started, I guess, when I moved to London at the age of 21. I was very much just following the path that I think a lot of people take. You know, you've been to uni and then you find yourself a corporate job and you're kind of just wrapped up in the direction that society expects you to take. I worked in the corporate world for 10 years. I think I'd always had a bit of an itching for, what would I eventually do? I think I knew it wasn't going to be forever, but I just also didn't know what way out to take or when that would ever happen. And yeah, eventually I had a massive spiritual awakening, which I'm sure we'll get into. And I just found the courage to leave. And I thought, I want to build my own life. I think I've become more confident in this knowing, but I don't think I've ever felt like I'm the same as other people, and I don't want to be. So I like to embrace every part of me and my authenticity, and I think I'm still on that road to, just becoming as embodied as I can as a unique individual.
Yeah, and I think, like, having a lot of conversations like this, you very, very quickly realize that this idea of kind of being like the finished article, like being fully healed, being fully embodied. The second you think you've done that, you failed. Like,
Yeah.
you've got it wrong. It doesn't work like that. You don't. So it's not a destination. It's the journey, but the journey of the rest of your life, which is really daunting. But I'm, like I said, we'll get into all of that good stuff as we go. So first things first. Obviously, you said you've had this like spiritual awakening. What's
Yeah.
really important to me, and what I always do with my guests, is we kind of like, okay, we've got this big event. Like, let's talk about the run up to that, because it's not gonna. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. There very rarely these things just kind of come out of nowhere. You don't.
Uh-huh.
You're not walking on the street and it slaps you around the face. There are
Uh-huh.
quite often things, more often than not in hindsight, that crop up that we look back on and go through that. So can you talk me a little bit through that process?
Yeah, of course. It's so interesting actually, because I was reflecting on this recently, and there's actually quite a lot into the run up that maybe, as you say, in hindsight, you kind of recognize. Because when I was 22, I went to a clairvoyant, and I remember coming out of that session being so energized and not really understanding why. I wasn't conscious enough to kind of take everything that maybe I could have taken from it. But I just remember being so energized, telling my parents and my sister, like, this is all the things that came from that session. Went back to my London life, and I just didn't really have people around me that I could talk to about it without kind of judgment. And it just slipped to the back of my mind. It was always there because I found it such a fascinating kind of thing to explore. But that, I think, was what was probably the start of the journey. And then as time went on, and in the sort of year or two leading up to my awakening, I was definitely getting more into health and wellness, started CrossFit, lost quite a lot of weight, and just really looking after myself more. I went vegan for a bit. There was definitely signs, of more kind of the well-being angle coming in. And then really what was probably the catalyst for the awakening was a breakup that I experienced in summer 2020. Yeah, a lot of things kind of went wrong in the relationship. And I do remember there were some key things that were said to me that really got me thinking. One of them being like, oh, are you just staying with me because you're coming up 30 or something like that? And I thought, do you know what's so funny is how much we are conditioned to think that these things are, oh, you're at a certain age, you better settle down, and yeah, it just really got me thinking. And then meditation was really what I turned to, um, which, yeah, sparked my awakening essentially, because then I started becoming aware of my thoughts and my beliefs. And yeah, that was the start of that.
Okay, so let's take it back. So just talk to me about this clairvoyant experience. Like, just so we're totally clear, what is a clairvoyant? What kind of came up for you in that experience?
So a clairvoyant is someone who reads your energy essentially. Clairvoyants, they I mean, they're not the same as psychics, but similar. You know, they pick up on your energy, they read your field, they mirror back to you, they tell the future. But I mean, let's be honest, the future isn't set, in my opinion. So they can give you pointers of things that might happen or like significant names, that sort of thing. And she just gave me so much inspiration. You know, she said things to me like, world working abroad. Like she gave me like countries I would visit. She said to me, you know, you've got really passionate opinions, you know, putting the world to rights, like be passionate about doing that. Like she gave me so much that again, I was 22. I didn't really understand and I wasn't fully aware, but I did feel something. And I think that's the main thing that I always look back on because I remember coming out of there and being like, wow, like I feel something. So it was almost like the truth being reflected back to me and my soul was like screaming at me like this is you, like this is who you really are. But I had to go through obviously a process before I got to be ready to embrace that, I think, properly.
Yeah, totally. And I think there is like that being ready to hear it. And like there is, if I rewind the clock a couple of years, talking to someone about a clairvoyant, saying things like honoring yourself and how you feel, things like that. Like I look back to, even sort of probably 3, 4 years ago, if I heard anyone say those things, it would be a scoff. But
Yeah.
I think, like you said, there's a lot of like, you got to be ready to hear it. And
Mm,
like, I'm on my own journey too. Do you know what I mean? So it's like I'm still being like, I'm developing my opinions and what I,
mm,
rather than kind of just like this knee jerk reaction. Like, who knows? I might be, clairvoyant it up before too long. And it's like I said, those things are there that you hold the resistance to are often, something to kind of like, maybe I should I should try that thing or I should give it a go. Like it's nothing more than curiosity. Like you
yeah.
might Google something out of curiosity. It's a very, very low commitment. Like I could be,
Mm.
oh, what does that mean? I'm just gonna Google it. Or I'll whack it in Chat GPT and it'll explain this to me like I'm an idiot and it comes through. So
Yeah, it's funny. I had a lot of friends kind of not like taking a similar opinion. When you said like some people scoff when you hear these things, that's kind of what happened to me because when I came out of there and I wanted to talk to people about it, I realized like well, one, I realized I'm feeling people's energy more and I could feel like a bit of judgment or like closed mindedness, let's say. So you can fall into that trap of just shrugging things off because you don't necessarily know who's open enough to want to talk about it. And then it just gets pushed aside, like, especially for me. I mean, I was 22, so I had many other things that I wanted to focus on, being partying and, you know, enjoying my life. But yeah, it is an open mindedness, a curiosity, as you say.
yeah, definitely. And I think there's a real like I really resonated with what you said about the like having people to talk to about it.
Mm,
That isn't a fault of anyone. That's just probably a reflection of like, okay, well, I need to put myself in some circles where that is. These sort of things, podcast, like that's not something I would typically talk to, say, work friends about. Like it's just not a conversation that would come up.
mm,
Maybe there's a fear of judgment in there. Maybe there's a bit of that, oh, there won't be like an understanding.
mhm.
But I think like that's one of the reasons that I want to kind of create a bit of a community around whatever this is and have those conversations to be like, okay, well, like let's talk about it. Like, worst case scenario, you decide it's not for you and you move on to
Yeah.
the next thing. Like it's yeah, quite an interesting topic. So it's always quite funny, like those major life events, breakdowns, breakups, those often sort of spark a change within people. And, looking back at, my life, my experience, conversations I've had with people, the whole end of a relationship thing comes up quite a lot. And yeah, like I said, there's so often it's that sort of, and you see so many people settle of just, there's nothing inherently wrong with settling down. But I think just settling for the status quo, if there's a bit of an itch within inside of you to not, yeah, to not do that, I think is really, really interesting. So what talk to me a little bit about, obviously, as much as you're open to, talk to me a little bit about that experience. Like what were the thoughts around?
I mean, yeah, I was scared because, again, like as much as these things were being said to me, you know, are you just staying with me because you're nearly 30? I mean, there was an element of, even now, I've said to my friends quite openly in recent weeks, I know I'm different, I feel different, and it's still uncomfortable. You just get used to the fact that you're different and you start embracing it more. And I love the fact that I am unique and that I'm not willing to take that path, but it still comes with those pressures, right? You still feel the things like in your head, their conditioning still exists. You see everyone around you still living a particular way, still following a certain timeline. You get questions, and even if people don't say the questions out loud, they'll probably think, oh, when are you going to settle down? When are you going to have children? It's so ingrained. It's actually kind of wild. But there was a lot going through my head at that time because I wasn't happy. Well, I was losing myself in the relationship, and there was just a lot going on that was out of my control that I needed to get out of. And I didn't know what was next. And that's always scary anyway, right? You don't know, you feel like you're the only one in this position. You're the only one in the world who's been through a breakup when you're going through a breakup. But I just knew that I couldn't stay. And I also had this confidence within me that there was something spiritual about my path that I needed to embrace that I perhaps hadn't been turned to prior to that. And that gave me so much hope, because spirituality in essence is that faith in something bigger than yourself, right? And even though it was really hard and I was suffering a lot, I still felt like, okay, there's something I can do here that's different and hopefully more fulfilling, and it's still going to lead me into the right places, and everything is still ultimately going to be okay. So yeah, while it was super hard and I struggled and I was confused, and particularly amidst my awakening, I was overwhelmed. I was also like really drawn to this idea of, okay, let's have faith, let's follow the path. There's a journey here. Might not look like anyone else's journey, but it is going to be the right journey.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's that, like, we often lose that sort of faith within ourselves, and whether that's through, the people around you, societal conditioning, whatever you want to call it, like that kind of thought of, okay, well, when the sticks are down, like, I can make sure that I'm all right. Now, it won't feel like it's all right at the time, but I'm not going to die and I'll probably be okay. And I think that's a really, like, you can lose that. And that, to me, I think that's really sad that people lose that. Like, there's times where I've doubted that within myself, that I feel like I'm on a train that I shouldn't be on and I can't get off, and it's going to hurt because I'm going to have to jump out the window, kind of thing. But yeah, I think, like I said, that's a really scary kind of place to be.
It's fear, isn't it? Like for me, it's fear that a lot of people that are held back from, and they often don't realize that, because fear stops you. Well, fear could have kept me in that relationship, to be quite honest. But fear could also have stopped me from doing anything, taking any step towards where I wanted to be. And I still have to recognize that now when I'm thinking about, okay, what would I like to achieve? What would I like to do next? What do I want to put out into the world? How do I want to speak authentically? There's still fear. I think the difference is that you have to have the courage to face it, because you can't grow without it. And I do genuinely believe there are so many people who allow fear to stop them from living authentically and embracing their authenticity. And again, I just don't know if everybody is necessarily aware of that, because conditioning runs deep, man. Like, we're not questioning enough. So it is, like I say, about the courage to face the fear anyway and just do the things and know that that's how the confidence is built at the end of it, right? Either you fail and you learn, or, I mean, you're going to learn either way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Like, you can try as hard as you like not to learn, but it's gonna you fundamentally, you're gonna be forged by that. And I heard something the other day from a sports performance psychologist, that confidence is a function of memory. And I think it's hard. Like, you hear a lot of stuff online about confidence, and whether that's lose 10 pounds in the next 10 weeks and feel confident, or whether that's something a little bit more deeper than just sort of that surface level. But and you can talk about all of these sort of things, but like, fundamentally, like, confidence is a belief based off of the evidence that you put in front of you. And it's your memories. Like, memories come and go. I went into the archives, and it's going to sound weird, but I went into the archives and I looked at, like, my social media and stuff like that, when I probably, well, it would have been back in end of 2022, start of 2023. And like, it was stuff around, like the content I was producing at that time in my life, and I was like, I'm really like, I just thought back of like, oh, it was a bit shit. But I actually went back to it, and maybe it didn't get the likes or the things that I would have wanted it to, or whatever. But fundamentally, I went back and I'm like, actually, like, it's not bad, and I just forgotten about it. So I think it's part of actually like reminding yourself about your ability and who you are, and that ability, that sort of like backing yourself, if you will.
100%. Like, if you're not putting in the reps, then you're never going to build the confidence. And the thing is, nobody wants to be shit at anything. Like, it's so awful and painful and uncomfortable to be shit at something, and or to at least feel like you're not good, even though other people might be saying, oh no, you're pretty good at that. You have to feel it yourself, and you can only get that by putting the reps in. But I think there's, again, it's fear. Too many people are scared to try. If you don't try, you're never going to get it, but they can't take that first step. It's cringy or it's uncomfortable. And yeah, I completely resonate with what you said. I mean, I look back at my old content, I can feel it's an amazing feeling when you can see yourself becoming more authentic. And, if you're trying to, like I am, speak better, I'm seeing the progress I'm making. Again, I would never have got to this point if I hadn't just started and been a bit shit at it at the first time I did it. So it's all about building that confidence for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's understanding that if you're going to try something new, like you said with the speaking, and I'm still getting that. Like I've done it for a year. I had a big break, and then wondering why I'm a bit like, I feel like I'm a bit rusty coming back to it. And like, I think it's just a reminder of like being shit is the precursor
Mhm.
to what, to like the outcome that you want. Like I think back to CrossFit, and now I think that's a great example. I know obviously you mentioned it as well when you were talking about before that we started recording. Like, there's so much of CrossFit that I'm so bad at, and like I've got my weightlifting nailed down, and I can smash that out. And I like the like Olympic lifting side of things. And that's good, but there's like a cognitive challenge to it, to be like, drop your ego, like let's go and like nail the pattern. Like, you clean and then you end up like the bars on the floor and then you jump. Like, how have you managed that? Gymnastics, things like that. The cardio side of it. There's times where the box that I train at, there is like a ranking system at the end of the day. So you put your scores in, and it ranks obviously the everyone in the gym. And there's times of like where weightlifting I can sit in like the top sort of 5 or 6 and feels pretty good. And there's other times where it's just like a cardio based workout with a load of burpees and wall balls in, where I'm like trying not to finish last. And
Mm.
look,
Arguably, that's where your confidence comes in even more. That's because your mental chat is going to get you through when your ego's screaming at you, you shit at this, you can't do it, why are you even bothering? That's when your confidence and your mental agility is the most important, isn't it? Because you can talk yourself down and be like, well, I'm not. I know I'm not. I'm just not good at those things. You can't be good at everything, or you're still improving. Your mindset is so important, but it's so powerful, isn't it?
yeah, definitely. And like you said, it goes. I think the important thing is to remind you that it goes both ways. Like, it's so easy to talk yourself down, be like, you're shit at this, just fucking give it up. Like, you know, don't. Why are you booking onto this? Like, what? Why are you trying this? Like, you shit. Don't bother. But fundamental, like, that then pushes us into the path of like conformity. And I probably assume that you're quite similar, that there is this like really non-conformist like streak in me that I really try and suppress sometimes. But the more you push it down, the more it comes out. But you end up kind of just playing it safe, and that's just that the fear, that kind of like ego talking you down, is on one side, but then on the other, like, that function, that ability to kind of like talk yourself down, it's the same voice that talks you up. And I think that's obviously where like the focus and the intention comes around it. Talk to me a little bit about meditation. Now, I think it's something that I've always had a bit of a weird relationship with, like meditation or meditative practices. And I'm sure a lot of people listening will as well. Like, I think you see that kind of, monks and lots of and murmuring and making weird noises. But what does meditation look and feel like to you?
Yeah, so For me now, I often will just sit with my thoughts, and that will just mean, silence, which a lot of people would be quite intimidated by that. But I've built myself up to that place. I mean, when I first started meditation, I would use guided meditations, which I still do sometimes because I think they're really important. They talk you through a journey and they help you to focus on different parts of your body. You can do meditations for specific things like confidence, as you say. You can do self love meditations, whatever it might be that you want to focus on that day. Me though, meditation is just something that I can come back to feel my feelings in my body again, right? We live in a world where you're so hectic all the time, people constantly moving, there's always something to be done, there's always things to think about, and then we don't slow down, and it's so important when you slow down. And it is scary, it's uncomfortable, but again, I've said this before, nothing good comes from comfort zone. So we have to be willing to face that discomfort and that fear of, oh, I'm going to have racing thoughts, it's not going to be nice for me. I think that's the whole point of it, to be honest, because you're meant to be then recognizing, okay, what's coming up for me? If it's coming up, then it's obviously important, it needs addressing in some way, maybe it needs healing. There's always going to be things that we don't want to face. And actually, behind those things that we don't want to face is our ultimate healing and our growth. So, meditation for me has just been a huge tool in my own growth and my own self understanding, self awareness, and healing journey. And it just brings me back to center. It brings me back to what I'm feeling in my body, which is, I think, super important. And they're the signals that we miss when we're living such busy lives, right?
Definitely. And like the way that what you said there kind of reconfirms my thoughts of it. And it might, it looks different for everyone. Like it's fundamentally like you've got the top of the funnel where there is so much noise, there's so much going on, racing thoughts, life, that you're just taken by the tide and you're basically just sort of this, you know, plastic bottle floating in the ocean. But the more you kind of cut through that, and yeah, you might hit some stuff that hurts. Like, one of my most sort of like formative things that I've ever done is kind of I went through, one day I was just really irritable and like it was just completely out of character. Didn't like something wasn't right. So I was like, okay, well, wrote in my notes, what's pissing me off? And I kind of cut through the noise, like I'm cold, it's busy. I've only just found it took me an hour to find somewhere to, sit down and plug my laptop in, blah, 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 blah. This whole sort of like spiel. Like that's, the top of the funnel, just the noise, like valid, but like let's try and move through it a little bit. And I started to get down to the point of like what was really coming out. And for me, it was just this like lack of fulfillment. And again, hindsight, wonderful thing. I kind of look back on that differently, and maybe if I was approached, have the same situation now, I would maybe view it slightly differently and be like, this isn't a panic toys up pram. It's a let's get back to the mission and plan, life further in advance rather than just kind of like hitting this panic button. But, unfortunately I don't have a time machine.
Yeah, but it's so true. That's another reason, I guess I'd already kind of touched on that. People don't want to hear what comes up for them if they slow down and like that. And that exact thing happened to me really, because when I started meditating, I realized that I didn't want to live the life I was living. It was uncomfortable for me to listen to that realization of, if you just carry on working a corporate job and building towards a society acceptable life, you're never going to feel fully fulfilled. And it's not nice to hear those things. Like that's your soul talking to you. And for the most part, it's easy, really, it's easy for 90% of us to go around and not ever listen to our heart and our soul, because you could easily I could have continued in that life, but it would have become, as you say, you feel uncomfortable and you feel like moody, and then you get bitter, and there's all these emotions that come with it. And then it's, yeah, trying to recognize what is really underneath. You might pretend you're cold and you're having a bad day, but sorry, the dog's. But underneath all that, there is that, as you say, an ultimate lack of fulfillment. You can't really hide that. That's going to keep coming back. Your soul is going to keep talking to you.
And it's really weird. Like the analogy that's sort of come into my head is like if you've got, say, a rotten vegetable in the fridge, and in the sort of drawer at the bottom of the fridge, and that's one thing. like I take that out, everything's going to be fine. I solved that problem. But if I leave it, it festers, it gets worse, and it starts to impact and infect and go its way across everything. And like that's there's only so much of that that you can take, right?
For sure. Yeah, and you're right. Like, but this is, I guess, healing in itself, isn't it? There's never really an end point, as you said earlier. You're always growing, you're always developing, you're always healing, and that in itself is quite scary for a lot of people. I mean, it's scary for me still. I mean, I know I'm on that journey now, and I'm so grateful that I get to be on a path of growth, but I can see why people wouldn't want to dip their toe into this stuff. You know, you're going to uncover things that are not nice. And yeah, you have to really just face the courage to face them. And it's not easy.
Yeah, definitely. And like it's one of those things, and it's yeah, like I said, it can be really painful and heartbreaking. And your identity, who you think you thought you were, your life's path, like you were saying, the person that you're supposed to be with, like that starts to like crumble away, and you're like, this kind of thought, this predetermined idea that I have that I'm working towards, the the predestined path or whatever, it starts to crumble away, and you're like, what's
Yeah.
and that's there's a level of like grief and heartbreak, and that's something we'll come back to in a minute, but like that we go through, and you're like, okay. And again, that goes, there's two sides to that. There's the oh shit, over, panic, but there's the other side of that where it's like amazing, I get to start again. Like I've got a blank canvas, and you don't often get one of those.
Hmm.
How lucky am I?
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to see that second side of it, isn't it? How lucky am I when you're in something that's so hard? And yeah, I mean, I had to do a lot of grieving of my old life. And I had, to be honest, my main thing was fear of judgment. There was not just around starting again and, losing relationships and that sort of thing, but also around the spirituality and the meditation and the awakening and the energy and all the things I was now interested in. It's something that I think I wasn't confident talking to people about. I was worried that people might think it was woo woo or weird, and I've really battled with that. And I think a lot of my healing has actually come through forcing myself to speak online and share my opinions and my passions, because you find that the more you do it, the less scary it is and the less you care ultimately. Caring what people think is such a prison. And again, that's something I didn't know I cared about until I started on this path. I really did not know that I was living in a way that was avoiding as much judgment as possible, just keeping small and safe and palatable to ensure that everyone liked me and that everybody was kind about me behind my back, or they in the things I had to say they would agree with. These are things I've had to grapple with, knowing now that being authentic really does mean the opposite of that. It means upsetting people with your opinions, potentially. It means people disagreeing with you. It means people not liking your energy, and people also being pissed off when you have boundaries that maybe you didn't have before. So for me, the fear of judgment has been definitely the biggest thing to battle with, and still to an extent is something I'm working through. But it's a very interesting one. I just don't think people necessarily know that they suffer with it until they do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, what you're saying there is so true. And there is an element of the two sides. That kind of like narrative is still there. Like as much as you gain in terms of getting to live authentically through you, obviously you give off a different energy. You're going to start attracting different people. You can then meet people that are more aligned with you, people that get it, people that you can have that more deeper, meaningful connection with, because you're kind of singing more from the same hymn sheet, for want of a better phrase. But then there is the loss, because you are going to piss people off. You are naturally going to move away from people. You might find that you actually need to kind of, cut people off, or move away from those situations that you'd always been in, whether that's relationships, whether that's friendships, whether that's, anything else that, we grow up, sometimes grow apart, but there's sometimes we that needs to be a little bit more mechanical, let's say, and a little bit more deliberate than just kind of like that naturally kind of dissipating over time. And then going through that loss and breakup, not necessarily, full on like, right, who's having the dog and who's who's staying in the house sort of thing. But the okay, well, someone I used to know kind of vibe, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
So moving towards through your journey now, some let's kind of talk a little bit about kind of this like awakening. Now, I think you hear like awakening and you think again sudden click, and I think like we've said before, it isn't a sudden thing that just suddenly happens. There is going to be a ramp up to it, but once and it's kind of a term that we're coining over the certainly this series of the podcast is kind of opening the Pandora's box of changing your fucking life. And it's one of those things where you open that box and unfortunately you can't put it back in. As nice as
Yep.
that may be sometimes, it's a can of worms, whatever you want to call it. And
Yeah.
just kind of got this mess in your lap that you suddenly have to start dealing with. So can you tell me a little bit about your experience and what that was like for you?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, like in hindsight, you realize that the signs were there in terms of awakening, or at least, I guess, yeah, awakening sounds like a sudden thing, but essentially, what an awakening is your consciousness, or you're becoming more aware of more. Your consciousness is expanding. You're becoming aware of more truths, let's say. So it was disorientating for me because mine was quite sudden. It felt sudden. I mean, now in hindsight, not as much, but it felt sudden because I hadn't just been dipping my toe into self help books or anything like that at the time. I just started meditating literally to deal with grief. So for me, it did feel like a moment, especially because mine came through meditation. I essentially had a third eye awakening experience where I was seeing imagery, as if you're dreaming, but in your mind's eye, and you're fully awake and aware. So it was disorientating for me because I was experiencing things that I had never experienced before and things I didn't know were possible, and things that just opened my mind so much to the possibilities of life and the universe and what I could be here to achieve and to work towards, rather than staying in boxes that maybe had been predetermined for me. Felt stressful because who could I have spoken to? I had a lot of people around me who were seemingly quite content living sort of certain societal paths. And you sound kind of crazy when you start saying to people that you think that there's more that you could do. And I remember when I quit my job and people were like, you're so brave. Somebody said to me, you're doing what all of us would love to do if we had the courage to do it. And this really put things in perspective for me about how many people just can't face the fear. And it was, yeah, it's still scary for me to do it, but I ultimately knew. I think I just had that faith of like, you have to try things. I couldn't bear the thought of just working until I retire and always niggling in the back of my mind, thinking, well, what more do I want to achieve? And if it's not this, then what is it? But waking up or going through an expansion of your consciousness is, yeah, wildly disorientating, not for the faint hearted. There were points where I was in a bad way. I was like, I feel like I've lived a lie for 30 years.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's crazy, really.
definitely. And I think it depends which way you look at it. Like, these sort of experience, like you said, isn't for the faint hearted. But I'm also like, okay, well, let's say you aren't faint hearted. You're going to suddenly become that very, very quickly because you've got to swim. You've got to deal with this.
Yeah.
And, I think it's also being mindful that, this isn't a work of minutes and hours. This is weeks, months, years that it's going to take to, like I said, that the whole healing or whatever is a continuous process. But there is a point where it won't feel like you're drowning so much and it's completely overwhelming. Like that just becomes whelmed at some point, which sounds quite negative, but I don't mean it that way at all. But so obviously, like you said, you've handed your notice in at your job, and not in a good way. So what sort of stuff is happening for you at this point in life?
When I handed my notice in, it was about a year, almost a year after I had kind of my meditation awakening moment where I'd spent most of that year in between really kind of coming to terms with the fact that I realized there was a lot more that I wanted to achieve and do, and there was a path that I could be on that I wasn't currently on. Uh, handing my notice in, again, it was overwhelming because, people around you are asking questions, and I just didn't have the confidence to say, everything I maybe wanted to say. I felt like I was the focus of attention. I didn't really want to be, I was just wanting to kind of leave quietly. I wasn't drinking at all as well. I gave up alcohol. So even having a leaving do felt quite pressurized because, I just wasn't the same person. It's so weird when you lose an identity or when you start shedding parts of yourself because I think we all as humans have this deep need to feel understood. And I think I realized quite quickly that that was something that one was never necessarily going to go away, but I was going to become more at peace with that. The only real person who will understand me fully is myself. And that's the whole point of getting to know and love yourself so much that it doesn't matter that other people misunderstand or if they don't, if they judge or if they don't fully get it. Because in those moments, you kind of, you don't want to be asked questions or you don't want to have to explain yourself and people to get confused. You just want to live and be you, and you want to take your own path and not have to face any of that. But when you're leaving a corporate job, of course, you're going to have to face questions because you've got hundreds of people that you've worked with that are interested in the next steps for you. And yeah, it was hard. I just knew I needed to get out. I can't really describe it in any other way. I just felt like that was my time. I needed to shed everything about that life. I left London. I'd lived there for 10 years. I've now sold my flat, so that's coming to a completion in the next few weeks. I literally have shed the whole of my old identity to make space for new because, again, you can't think the universe rewards that courage, but I also think you can't really make space for new connections, new opportunities, new experiences when you're holding on to things that are no longer aligned.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's a level of like not living in the halfway house. Like you said, what I really liked what you said there is like you'd shed that identity. Like you left the job, sold the flat. Like very quickly that becomes quite hard to still sort of dabble, if that makes sense. And I think that's kind of where people find, been guilty of this myself, like you you still dabble within that identity almost through comfort.
Mm,
Well, I know I can do that. And you have like one foot in that camp, but like one foot in your future. And sometimes the best thing to do is to rip the band-aid off and just, fully live in this new, this new identity, this new world of being, I say.
yeah, and I think it's also just realizing or accepting that you don't owe anybody anything in the process because I felt like I did, to be honest. I felt like I owed explanations. I felt like I owed it to people to be the same version of me. I felt like I owed it to the friends that I was leaving behind to continue to perform an identity that I no longer felt was fitting for me. Just wildly uncomfortable, all of it. I think that's the best way to sum it up. You are a different person. You've seen different truths. You've explored parts of your identity you didn't know you were hiding. You are becoming a more full human and more authentic. And yeah, you have to just sit in that awful discomfort, but also accept that you're gonna probably get people not understanding, and that's okay. I don't think we can ever expect everyone to always get on board. And to be honest, I think a lot of it was in my own head. I think I'm quite a sensitive person, probably more than I realized I was before. And I would build things up in my own head so much. I'm sure people are wondering or talking, you think that there is a lot more going on than perhaps there is. And you maybe will never know the full truth and ideally you wouldn't want to know the truth, right? If people had been gossiping or, whatever, I don't think I need to know that. But there is definitely a part of me that overthinks and puts pressure, and especially when you're a recovering people pleaser, which I think, to be honest, most people are people pleasing without realizing it, that you just think you think you owe people these conversations or explanations, and a lot of it really is just accepting that you are allowed to go in your own direction and forge your own path, and not give everybody a full explanation, and not feel like you're owing everybody all of the details of your new life and your new prospects and the things that you want to go out and achieve, you know?
Definitely. And I completely agree with what you're saying there. And I think it's kind of an element of kind of being economical with the truth. And, I've been in, work settings where I just think my time's come to an end. And I'm like, I'd like to think I'm switched off on enough to know that there's more to meet the eye than that. But you say another reason, so go live your life. That's fine.
Mm.
Like if you were that fussed about me knowing, you tell me. But that's fine. You go, you do what you need to do, and all power to you.
And we normalize that reaction, Harvey, because my God, I don't think my corporate job, again, it's probably a lot of it's my own people pleasing tendencies, but I also do think that a lot of corporate environments are a little bit toxic. People like to gossip. They like to know what people are doing, and they like to kind of pass judgment. I'd
Pass.
been working in the same industry 10 years. Say that again.
I said it passes the time.
Yeah,
A lot
exactly.
more
Because then
interesting than end of year.
spreadsheets.
Spreadsheet.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean?
It is. And I totally agree, because I also engaged in this stuff. I'm not going to sit here all high and mighty and say that I was never one of them. I was one of them. But when you see that, you can't unsee it, unfortunately. And then, yeah, you just want people to go away. Don't ask me questions. I just want to do my own thing, and I don't want to, yeah, have to deal with all the stuff that comes with it. But yeah, I do think corporate life is, there are a lot of stuck people in corporate jobs. I've said this before, and it's not a judgment, it's an observation, because I was one of them and I've lived that life, and I know I was stuck and I didn't realize I was stuck at the time. But it's an easier path, you're getting a monthly salary.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But like similarly to yourself, like you may be feeling a kind of way, but then who are you to think that you're the only one?
Mhm.
Because someone somewhere is going to be sitting there with a very similar set of circumstances, probably thinking and feeling a very similar set of thoughts, feelings, emotions that you are. So that may bring someone comfort. It might not. Who am I to think that I'm the only one ever
Mm.
to have, dealt or felt with those sort of things? And I think that's fine. There is always going to be a reason. Very like more often than not, like will be subconscious. They will, we don't have a clue where it comes from, and that's where obviously the investigation and the looking into it, whether that's through a method practice or whether that's writing what's pissing me off in your notes section in your on your phone, and kind of giving yourself the time to go through and work through those sort of things. Yeah, definitely lots of stuff to kind of think of there.
Yeah, we have a negativity bias as humans, right? So we often, I think, like in that situation, I definitely assumed that everybody was kind of thinking the opposite to me, and I think the further I've gotten on my journey, I've realized there are so many people who think like me, and I shouldn't be worried about, expressing myself and being who I am, because the more I have found the courage to do that, the more I've also found the right people that have kind of really resonated with my views and my takes on things, right? But yeah, sometimes when you're in it, it's really easy to assume that everybody's passing a judgment, and it's not always the case.
Yeah, definitely. When I get a guest on, I always take time to kind of immerse myself in their content and what they're about. Sometimes listen to like a podcast they've been on. But one thing that's come up quite a few times looking through your stuff is this idea of asking yourself hard questions.
Mm.
Talk to me a little bit about that, and maybe give some examples of like hard questions that you've asked yourself.
Yeah, I had to ask myself so many mainly things like, if you continue doing this for another 5 years or 10 years, how happy are you going to be? Also, things like, are you fully fulfilled? Is there enough purpose or light in your life that's kind of giving you comfort? These were all no answers, by the way. I asked myself questions that I had to sit with the realizations of, okay, no, like I don't have enough purpose in my life. I don't feel fulfilled in my day to day. I do believe that there's more out there. I'm not working towards it. They're questions I just never thought to ask myself. I don't know why I would. I was just very much in a Groundhog Day kind of life. And don't get me wrong, I loved my 20s. I had the best time in London. I had amazing fun, but there was just no appetite for self reflection from myself. And then when I did start questioning more, that was obviously when I had to sit with these uncomfortable answers. But I just think it's so important because it helps you to understand when you ask difficult questions of yourself, it helps you to understand what you truly value. And, for some people, purpose is not that. They can happily work a job that they don't feel fulfilled in because they'll find purpose in other ways or they'll find meaning through other areas of their life. Everybody is different. But for me, it was so pivotal and so focal. And it really, really scared me to think that I wouldn't pursue something more meaningful in my daily life because there was just that gaping hole inside of me that was like, no, you really can find more meaning every day and pursue something that you love. And having that self belief, that it's possible for you is stuff I also needed to go and work on off the back of it. But yeah, asking hard questions is a necessary evil in some ways because without having done that, I wouldn't be where I am now. And life might have been a bit more cushy, but it wouldn't have been necessarily more comfortable, because I'd still have been having to sit with the feelings.
Yeah, definitely. And when you said there around when you said that some examples of the questions of like, am I okay with not having purpose in my day to day life? That question makes my skin crawl. Do I
Mm,
makes my skin crawl because
mhm.
I value it incredibly highly, and on the own journey of that, working at that, how does that come up? I don't have the answers yet, but I'm sure we'll get there one day. And
Mhm.
yeah, work of months and years rather than, hopefully I walk down the street and that'll slap me around the face.
Yeah.
That ain't happening.
Well, it's funny though, isn't it? Because I think it takes time to listen to your soul and your heart. Like even now, I don't have a clear vision for the future. I have things that I love to do and I'm passionate about and my opinions and things like that I feel strongly that I want to share. But yeah, it is the outcome of that question. If the answer is no, I don't have enough fulfillment, is then okay, well, what's going to bring me that? And if you don't have those answers immediately, then that's when people might start to shut down because obviously it's really scary. You're like, okay, well, what am I doing then? What can I do? What am I here to achieve? And as you say, it's a process, it's a journey. It doesn't necessarily just hit you in the face. You have to be willing to do the things that society deemed cringy a long time ago, which is slow down and love yourself more and work on your own growth. And I think for a long time, we've just been conditioned to see that as a bit icky. And, people who are they're into themselves. I always used to laugh at the fact that I would definitely use that as an insult to people, oh God, they really love themselves. Unfortunately, that's so unbelievably ridiculous as a statement because if you don't love yourself, then you're never going to feel fully fulfilled as a human being, regardless of what your values are and where you want life to take you. It's the most important thing that we're never taught to do. And in fact, the opposite, like, we're taught that it's a bit embarrassing. So, yeah. But you have to do it, right? It's not comfortable work either, but it's really necessary.
Definitely. And I think like the statement you said there, or something along the lines of like they're so self-absorbed. Like,
Mm,
let's remove the judgment of what you think that means. Listen to the words. You are self-absorbed. I care about myself,
yeah.
and that's bad, is it? I give a shit about myself. Right. Okay, and what's wrong with that? That's
There were
fundamental, like, care about other people, care about passions, hobbies, work, whatever you want to call it. But fundamentally, there is a common denominator of every single one of those, and that is you. Let's give a shit about that a little bit sometimes to focus on making everything around it as best it can be.
It goes back to the people pleaser thing because we're essentially taught to please everyone else and not ourselves. So, I mean, I know somebody genuinely said to me in my corporate job when I was working more on my own growth, they said, you know, be careful how much you self reflect because you might become self obsessed. And I just have to laugh because, yeah, like we assume collectively that being self obsessed is cringy or there's something wrong with that. It's not, it doesn't have to be an obsession in a destructive way. You know, if you're obsessed with yourself, it's because you love and appreciate yourself for who you are. And that's how you can become the highest version of who you are. You're never going to get to that fullest potential without loving yourself wholly and accepting every part of who you are, right? But it's just such a deep conditioning. And people, yeah, like I say, I definitely used to use that insult. I would use it and say, you know, if people really love themselves, it must be a bad thing. But perhaps they're just not your people. Perhaps you know, you're not for everyone. And that's what authenticity ultimately is.
Definitely. And you know, some relationships, whether that's at work, whether that's you know, in your personal life, like fundamentally, like you're gonna go through and you put in two and two together. What happens when that equation doesn't equal four? And like you think it's the end of the world, but like fundamentally, that's very much a okay, two plus two. I'm going east, you're going west. Okay, like no hard feelings. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be this big, crazy, dramatic thing. And to think that that's not a summation of your own life. Like there are people who are going to be there for a few series. There might be someone that is there for an episode. That might just be it. But then there's others who are just going to be the cameo in the background.
Percent. But again, these are things I wasn't consciously aware of
Yeah,
before. They're things that I now know and I now accept, and I'm now very, you know, everything's a lesson at the end of the day, regardless of whether it's an experience or a person. And I did a piece of content a little while ago around being on a train and whether you would continue on that train if you knew that the only way to get off would be to take a risk. You know, if people will stay on the same train for 5 years because they're scared to get off in case there's something they don't like on the platform. I was one of those people, again, like, you know, I would have stayed where I was because it felt safer and ultimately was never serving my growth. But when I became more aware of these things, like, okay, I might get off the train and I might lose some friends. Well, actually, if that means I'm going to gain some that I can have authentic, open conversations with, then the risk is worth it.
amazing. Definitely. And, you know, these are all obviously things that come, you know, post enlightenment, awakening, whatever
Yeah.
you want to call.
Yeah.
So, what would you say to someone who is kind of contemplating, you know, doing this sort of level of deeper work?
Hmm.
Someone that you know, maybe they've just had that experience of of an enlightenment, of an you know, an awakening, whatever you want to call it. What would your advice be to someone who's you know going through the early stages of that process?
Yeah. The first thing I would say is have compassion for yourself because it's really scary and there's parts that are not going to be easy to sit with. But I would also say the fact that you're even having these realizations at all, in my opinion, is amazing because it shows that you have more to give in life and you have more that you're capable of. And I think waking up to those realizations is incredible. It's so special. So it's about taking that time to be brave enough to sit with the things that you're feeling and figure out what changes you might be able to make and start small because don't, you know, set yourself huge goals that are scaring you more. But if it's a case of wanting to find more fulfillment, for instance, it's just listing or carving out the time and being disciplined with the time to listen to the things that you're feeling and then take that inspiration and run with it. If you feel in your heart that there's something you'd like to pursue or there's like a side project that you want to try, it's really taking those little micro actions to doing them because ultimately the feelings of discomfort will never go away unless we start taking some action in the direction that we think could serve us better, right? Having been through it, I mean, there's so much advice, really, I guess, so many learnings that I've had at least. But I would say start with that. And another one would also be don't care what people think. Try not to care what people think because your journey is your own and you just have to do what is best for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Something else that you speak about a lot is around like creativity.
Mm.
Why is that so important to you?
I feel like I'm just a creative child. I don't know. I could walk into any art gallery and I just light up. Like, I just love weird stuff. Like, creativity is weird, isn't it? Like, there's no conformity there. There's always just a person behind that canvas or that music or whatever that's had some emotions that they want to express. And that's the way that they've chosen to express them. And I just find it fascinating. And I think creativity is our highest link to source or to the universe or whatever you want to call it, because creativity is not logical. There's no, I'm going to add this up and it's going to make this. It's just a feeling that you put on a page or in a music or in a poem, or even when you're speaking, there's a form of creativity. You're just, the words are flowing through you, right? And I find it fascinating because it's something we cannot explain really, but it gives so much solace and it brings not only the people who are creating the creativity solace, it brings all of us who are consuming the creativity solace and healing in some way. I just think it's so underrated. And we live in a country that, well, I think there's so many countries really that don't invest heavily enough into the arts and creative practices, but we're just not realizing how much good they can have for people emotionally. Yeah, I am very, very passionate, I think, about creativity. And it doesn't have to be what people stereotypically think creativity is. You don't have to be an artist, but it is just it's self-expression at the end of the day. So whatever form feels good to you, so cathartic. And I think it has to be prioritized for sure.
Definitely. Where do you think that kind of the passion that you have for creativity come from?
I really don't know. London definitely helped me because London is so free and open minded, and there's so much art and creativity and stuff like that down there. I don't know where this came from in me. I've always loved music as well. Like, my Discover Weekly playlist on Spotify is like my most listened to thing. Um, I just like to explore new concepts. I think it's just partly open mindedness, never shying away from something different, different perspectives, different ways to express yourself. I love films, like indie films and that sort of thing. I've just been drawn to it a lot. And like I say, with galleries as well, to me, that's just the best thing. I love going to the cinema. I love going to galleries. I just have to consume art. I think it's just really healing for me. But I really don't know where that's come from. There's nobody in my family, my immediate family, that is stereotypical creative, let's say. I did have a great grandma who I never obviously, or great great grandma who I never met, who was a singer and she performed on the stage. So I do feel like there's some connection there. I don't sing myself, but I do see that her life path was very different for the time that she lived in, because this was in the early 1900s. And on her death certificate, it said spinster. So I laugh because I'm like, she was a bit of me. Like, she was pursuing her own path. She was doing her creative practices. She wasn't conforming to what back then was really heavy stereotypes. You have to be a certain way. Even now, it still lingers, but back then more so. So I think I've just been, yeah, drawn to people that are different, concepts that are different, perspectives that are different, anything that challenges my own view of the world. And that's everything that creativity is. So I love it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you said there about, creativity being something that isn't necessarily a like cut and dry, this sort of like I can't picture myself with a paintbrush or going and doing pottery. Like that's not really me. But like I said, I think this idea of creativity and like I know when I'm being creative, when I'm doing a creative practice, like a lot of other noise kind of tunes out. And, whether it's something like podcast, having the conversation and, like I get to scratch a couple of itches all in one go. I love having conversations. I love that they're meaningful and they're not just like, hi, how was your day?
Yeah.
Good, thanks. You? Yeah, not too bad. Like that's just not a bit of me. But you can. Like, I always try to tick like a few boxes in one go. um, like I see this as like obviously a creative practice. I have to go into, doing a bit of research. I have to go into your creative practice. I have to start to understand how you work and how, going through all these different things is really, really important. And starting to understand, you and what that is as well. That can be music. It could be, like I used to work in the fitness industry, and I would always like a spin class, for example. Yeah, you 1 minute we've got like some proper like gangster music into like the Venga Boys. Then I would just try and deliberately lose the room with something really sad, like a bit of Adele, and then you bring it like trying to bring it back, and you can feel that energy within yourself. Like okay, admittedly, you have to kind of like tune into it to an extent, but like I can't imagine that you're listening to S Club 7 or the Venga Boys with a like all
Mm.
miserable. Like you can't help but smile. Like, and that's the beauty of it. Like, I'm sure we could get into the very exact science behind it, but like
Just
the
taking people
science,
on a
yeah,
journey. At the end of the day, you're taking people on a journey, aren't you? With any creativity. And that's why, some people are drawn to certain music and other people are not. And the same with pictures and art. And we're not all meant to like the same things. It's authenticity, it's expression, and creativity is exactly that. So I just think it's really important for sure.
definitely. I think that's a cool place to end things there. Thank you so much for your time. Before we finish up, what's next for you?
What's next for me? So much. Hopefully, more opportunities like this, more speaking, more writing. I've been trying to build my Substack. I need to get doing that more consistently. I teach astrology, but I also do one-to-one astrology because for me that was the main thing that helped me to understand myself better. Reading people's birth charts and developing my psychic abilities as well. Because the more I'm tuning in spiritually, the more I'm kind of getting insight, particularly with clients where it's really resonating. And so, yeah, my journey is really only just unfolding, but hopefully in the future, more of that and more helping people recognize their intuition and create from things that they feel and just embrace their own unique path and follow their hearts for sure.
Amazing. And where can people find you?
Can find me on Instagram, TikTok, at Rachel Murray, which is Murrey. And I have little links in my bio there so people can discover a bit more if they want to. But they're the main two, yeah, social platforms you can find me on.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I've had a lovely chat.
Thanks, Harvey. It's been fun.